All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. This is a channel built for educational purposes, and we look at mostly like theories of everything. People that I've done research on in the past who you probably haven't heard of um, outside of this channel, and but I think that they've made great contributions. Um, but They're languishing in obscurity. Most likely, they're also deceased by now. And so I'm just trying to put their work back out there. And today is the 327th video that we've done on Dewey B. Larson and his reciprocal system of theory. And the reciprocal system of theory was first articulated by Mr. Larson back in the late 1950s, and he wrote a number of books in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Finally, he died in 1990. He started out with his two fundamental postulates, which kind of articulated kind of the most concise version of the theory, and then expanded upon that over the next years. And he created an entire theoretical universe about how the universe operates if his postulates are correct, and kind of compared his theoretical universe with the observed and measured and proposed universe from the legacy science. And in general, probably about 90% of the reciprocal system of theory agrees with legacy science in most fields. But when we get into the so-called relativistic fields, the realms of the very small, the very large, and the very fast, the legacy science kind of breaks down. This is the Newtonian worldview, kind of breaks down when you're getting into the onto the extreme margins of phenomena. And just in the same way for Einstein's relativity theory was really the same, the same kind of approach where, yeah, well, Newton is right up to a certain point, but then when we're talking about these really extreme phenomena, then it breaks down. And so the Einsteinian relativity was designed to shore up those areas. And Larson's theory is kind of the same. He's trying to shore up the areas where Newtonian mechanics doesn't really work out. But I think Larson went a little bit further because he was able to not only correct things in terms of like mathematics, but he also like really helped to shed light on the concepts that were underlying. And so many of the concepts that the Newtonian universe had, as well as going all the way back to the ancient Greeks, are Larson found to be somewhat untenable. And so he went a further deeper into the legacy science to dredge out a lot of the fundamental mistakes that they were making. Probably one of the main ones is just the idea of the container. Now, for Larson, the basic idea is that the universe is made completely and entirely out of motion. Whereas the ancient Greeks really felt that the universe was made out of matter, made out of atoms. And the Einsteinians came up with E equals mc squared. So, well, it looks like matter, but it's really energy. So Larson is saying it's not either matter or energy. And in fact, the mere fact that you can convert matter to energy via equals mc squared demonstrates that neither one of those things can be the most fundamental thing. There has to be something underlying both of them, and that is motion. And for Larson, motion was the relationship between space and time. And this gets to that setting concept that I was talking about. The Greeks and up to Newton, and then, through Einstein, they felt that space and time were really like the container of the universe. The action of life and of phenomena of the universe occurred on this stage of space and time. Space and time was really like the stage or the setting upon which all of these things happened. But in Larson's system, space and time are not the container of the universe or the stage. They are actually the contents of the universe. The universe is made out of space and time. And so that is a profound shift. Now, we could go further into Larson's theory, just in terms of the fundamental postulates. Motion is the relationship between space and time. Space and time are reciprocals of one another, hence the reciprocal system of theory. They do not have any independent existence. They only exist together in motion. Motion is basically a fraction with space or time as the numerator and time or space as the denominator. Space and time are identical to one another except that they are reciprocals, meaning that they have the same qualities. One of those qualities is their coordinate nature. They both come in 3 dimensions, or I would say 3 or 4 dimensions. If you look at a cube can be broken down in 3 dimensions, or it can be broken down into 4 dimensions, depending on whether you want to use cubic coordinates or tetrahedral coordinates. And and so space and time both have their coordinate aspects. They also both have what Larson calls their clock aspects, clock time and clock space. This is a progression, like time. Time is always getting later and later and later and later. That is the progression of time. But time is not getting later in any particular direction. You can't, it's just a constant flow. This is what Larson calls a scalar motion, and this is what he uses to build his universe, is a scalar motion, which is a motion that hasn't really been recognized as being important. And Larson talks about that in this article that we're going to be looking at here just in a minute. And now, so that's what he's talking about with clock time. Now, clock space is the same. Instead of saying that time is always getting later and later and later, you say that space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart. And you can envision this using a balloon with dots on it. You blow up the balloon, all of the dots are moving away from each other, but not in a specific direction. So scalar motion is a motion that has a magnitude, but it has no specific direction. That is the outward or the flow of space or the progression of space. So space and time both have those 2 qualities, coordinateness and clockness. And then they also both are quantized, meaning that they come in only discrete units. And you have to have a full unit of space before you have any space. You have to have a full unit of time before you have any time. If you have 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, you have the speed of light, which is what Larson refers to as unit speed. 1 over 1 equals 1. For Larson, the speed of light is a boundary in the universe. It's really like a midpoint or a reference point or an origin, an ether, a state of rest. In a universe of motion, universe made out of motion, the state of rest is actually in motion at the speed of light, outward in all directions. And half of the universe is actually moving faster than the speed of light, which is completely, out of bounds for the legacy science, where Einstein is saying that the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe. It's because Einstein wasn't aware of this second part of the universe, where this Larson refers to as the cosmic sector, where everything is moving faster than the speed of light. Now we are looking at a paper that Larson put together that is called The Nature of Motion. And we started this paper yesterday. In the first part of the paper, he got into discussing a little bit about scalar motion and how scalar motion was something that really hasn't been, it's been noticed because, in particular, that all of the distant galaxies are moving away from each other. And that is a scalar motion. Unless you are prepared to say that our galaxy is at the center of the universe and that all of the other galaxies are moving away from us, unless you're wanting to say that, then you would say that we are also participating in this scalar motion, that we are moving away from all of the other galaxies, analogous to this expanding balloon. Whether you're talking about the surface or even in the interior of the expanding balloon, that all of the galaxies are moving away from each other. The farther apart they are, the faster they're moving away from each other. And scalar motion, you don't need any type of direction. It's expressible as just a magnitude, the expansion of space. And that gravitation is the opposite. It is basically, if you suck in the balloon, all of the dots are moving toward each other. And it only appears as if there's action at a distance. It only appears that there's an attraction between one and another. It's just actually that the space itself is contracting. And then also, so that is evidence, factual evidence that scalar motion exists. But the scientists have not really delved into that and determined that this is actually a different kind of motion than vectorial motion, which is the normal motion that we're accustomed to, that's motion with a direction, an arrow, that, motion north by northwest or whatever. So that's what he talked about there in the first installment here of this paper that's called The Nature of Motion. Now we want to get into the second part. And the other thing has to do with reference system. So if I'll just read this last paragraph and then we'll get into the new material here. Scalar motion does not conform to these relations. In the example cited, the motions take place coincidentally in all inward or outward directions, contrary to Newton's first law, and result in changes of position in all of these directions. Such motion has no property other than a magnitude. It is simply an increase or decrease in the separation between identifiable points or objects. Thus, it has no inherent relation to the reference system. In order to represent scalar motion in a reference system of the conventional type, meaning like a stationary reference system, a coupling of the reference system independent of the motion must be supplied. Uh, so basically, you're saying if you've got all these expanding, these galaxies expanding, such as on a balloon surface, um, you would make the reference point by pointing at one of those galaxies and saying this one is stationary. So all the other ones are moving from this one. So you're basically arbitrarily appointing one of those myriad of galaxies as the one that is stationary. Okay, so a coupling to the reference system independent of the motion must be supplied. The direction of the motion as seen in the reference system is a property of the coupling, not a property of the motion. So it's a property of you appointing arbitrarily something as being motionless when actually it is in motion compared to all the others. No different than all the others. Okay, obviously a conventional spatial coordinate reference system which cannot represent coincident motion in more than one direction is incapable of representing multi-directional scalar motion in its true character. It represents only one component of the total motion and gives us a distorted picture of that component. If we designate our galaxy as A, the direction of motion of galaxy X, as we see it, is AX, and its position in time, T, is XT, a location on an extension of the line AX. But observers in galaxy B, if there are any, see it as moving in the very different direction BX and see its position at time T as X2, a location on an extension of the line BX. Those in galaxy G see the direction as GX and the location in time as X3, and so on. No one of these directions or positions has any more significance than another. We cannot define a specific point that represents the position of galaxy X in the reference system. The best that we can do is to define a location in the reference system that represents the position of that distant galaxy relative to the location of our Milky Way galaxy. When we observe the moving system of galaxies from one of these specific locations, we are taking that location as a reference point. In effect, we are coupling the moving point to the reference system, identifying it with a fixed point in that system. The moving galaxy from which the observation is being made is then represented as motionless, while each of the other galaxies in the scalar system which are actually moving in all directions is represented as moving only in the direction radially outward from the point of observation. The speeds of the individual galaxies are similarly misrepresented. Since the rate of increase in the separation between any two galaxies is not altered by the coupling to the reference system, the immobilization of the reference galaxy by the coupling has the effect of transferring its motion to each of the other galaxies in the system. This finding that the position of an object with a scalar motion similar to that of the distant galaxies can be specifically defined in a spatial reference system only relative to some particular point, and cannot be defined relative to the reference system as a whole, in the manner in which vectorial motion is defined, will no doubt be distasteful to many, perhaps most, scientists, particularly since it opens the door to the possibility that there may still be other limitations on the capabilities of the conventional reference system. Our everyday activities take place in a fixed three-dimensional space, and it seems to be a it seems to be a fact of experience that every physical object occupies a specific location in that space. But time and again in the history of science, an assumption that once seemed almost axiomatic has had to be abandoned when additional information became available. The revision of existing ideas about motion that is now required is merely another instance of this same kind. The existence of scalar motion is undeniable once attention has been called to it. The properties of this type of motion and the limitations on the ability of the conventional reference systems to represent the positions and motions of the objects that are involved are therefore empirically established features of physical activity with which all physical theories must come to terms. Several other aspects of scalar motion are relevant to the present discussion. In the galactic situation, the location of the observer is the reference point, but the reference location for other scalar motion may be, and usually is, determined by other factors. In gravitation, the location of any mass that is stationary in the reference system becomes the reference point for the scalar system of motions, of which the motion of that mass is a member. The reference point in the case of the expanding balloon is determined by the placement of the balloon. If it is placed on the floor of a room, the point on the balloon surface that is in contact with the floor is the reference point. Two basic features of scalar motion are illustrated by the balloon placement. First, the reference point of a scalar motion is independent of the motion itself and may be altered by external factors. The balloon can be moved. Second, the reference point and the system of motions related to it may be in motion vectorially. For instance, the balloon may be resting on the floor of a moving vehicle. As can be seen from this illustration, the two types of motion are independent. No theories or assumptions are involved in the description of the relations between scalar motion and the conventional reference systems given in the foregoing paragraphs. The details of the representation of this type of motion in the reference system are simply a matter of geometry. Thus, the conclusions that have been reached are factual, not theoretical or speculative. The results that we obtain by applying these findings to specific physical situations are therefore likewise factual. We may begin this application by noting that the findings with respect to the representation of scalar motion in the conventional reference systems show that gravitation is an inward scalar motion, not only where the gravitating objects are free to move so that the motion is observable, but in all cases. Recognition of the generality of this identification has heretofore been blocked by the observation that gravitational effects often originate in objects that are not in motion, as motion is currently defined. This obstacle is now removed by the finding that all gravitating objects are moving inward in all directions, and that the apparent lack of motion in some cases is due to the inability of the reference system to represent scalar motion as it actually exists. Okay, I think we're going to stop right there. So that is the key point. So gravitation, or also electricity, magnetism, they're seen as being action at a distance, and that there must be some kind of connecting force between the object and the object that is gravitating toward. But Larson is saying that no, the object is gravitating in all directions, but we are observing it in this one direction because this is our reference system, because we have arbitrarily appointed this as the reference system. So there is no action at a distance. It's just that the whole system is moving inward, and we happen to be observing it moving from one point to another point. But if we appointed a different reference point, it would also be moving toward that point. In the analogy of the contracting balloon, it appears as if two objects are moving toward each other, but if you bring in a third object, both of those other two objects are moving toward that one. They're all moving toward each other. It is the contraction of space itself, analogous to the surface of the balloon, that is occurring, not any type of specific directional, vectorial, gravitational attraction. So we have our whole concept wrong when dealing with something like gravitation like that. So that's kind of what I was talking about at the beginning, where I'm saying that not only is Larson correcting the Newtonian mechanics in terms of the very fast and the very small and the very large, but he's also correcting some of the underlying concepts that we have that are also incorrect, such as this setting concept, that the universe is occurring within this setting of space and time. No, Larson says, the universe is composed or constituted. The contents of the universe are space and time. And motion is the relation between space and time. And matter and energy are merely two different kinds of motion. And they are made out of space and time. So, in order to accept the reciprocal system, you have to be able to assume that you can have motion without something moving. And in fact, that something that you get that eventually is moving is motion itself. That something is motion. And the motion, but you don't need the something even to have motion. Motion exists before that. Motion precedes all the other phenomena. So, and it is actually the state of rest of the universe is in motion. So Larson is not only correcting the math and the application of the Newtonian mechanics, but he's correcting the concepts that go back much further, all the way to the Greeks and so on. Okay, we're going to leave it off here and start up this paper again tomorrow. I think it'll probably take 2 or 3 more days to get through this paper, and we will do that tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in today, and have a nice day.